pentru prezentarea frumoasă. Thank you very much indeed. I'm honored to be with you and to direct this summer school for the second time. It's really a privilege for me, and I'm really happy I can do it and I can share with you my knowledge. And I would really appreciate if you could discuss with me some concepts, because I think they are very crucial. This year we are speaking about cosmogonies, about the creation of the world, and this how we scholars interpret it. And this is something extremely important, I believe. I will try to share this now. Work. Work. Can you see it?
Yes, yes.
Oh, that's great. And
It works.
At least now. Anyway, so as Professor Renata Tatomir said, I will be speaking about creator și lume creată in Textele Piramidelor, the creator and the created world in the pyramid texts. Well, first of all, we again move to Egypt. Yesterday you had some late period lectures, and now we come back to the stage where actually first religious texts ever were written down. This is a very significant and very important moment, as you can imagine. This is something what happened in Egypt during the reign of Unis, last king of the 5th dynasty, and in the 24th century BC. Why? That would be the question. Why did people, here you can see the text of Pepi, so this is not, these are not the first text curve, but one of the following. Last year I was speaking a little bit about
Cred că s-a deconectat. Să vedem.
Da, s-a deconectat. S-a deconectat. Văd că nu mai apare în chat.
Sperăm că înseamnă că este conexiunea.
Da.
Da, va fi o problemă.
I'm so sorry. So it cannot be without problems, as we can see. I hope it won't happen any more. So once more.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So I don't know if there are people who participated in the lectures last year. So I will repeat some information, but some basic information. You certainly know, working with Professor Tatomir, what the pyramid texts are. She also wrote significant lectures, including the pyramid texts in her work. And so as for now, there are 11 pyramids or tombs from the Old Kingdom that contain the pyramid texts, starting from Unis. You can find this information almost everywhere in, I'm not sure, I'm sorry, I haven't checked that. I should have, but I will check after the lecture if there is an article in Romanian Wikipedia about it. But if not, you can find it in French, English, and German, of course. Anyway, today I'm going to speak about the creation, and I would like to ask you, what do you think? Who is the creator in the ancient Egyptian pyramid text? I mean, the oldest religious text ever. Does anyone know or suppose? Any guesses?
Osiris?
Can you please say something more? Why Osiris, you think?
Because he is connected to the deceased king.
That would be something very important, and that is. But actually, he's never, ever mentioned in the creation context. Any other ideas?
Could you please show the hieroglyphic text?
You mean the one before?
Yes, the one before.
Anyway, I don't want to keep you too long, but normally when I ask this question, people say that it's Ra, that this is the sun. Because, first of all, you can find some attestations of Ra Atum in the pyramid texts. Well, when you, in general public, when you think about ancient Egypt, it seems that Ra is the most important god. And I decided to check it because I was somehow dubious about it. So I checked if it's really Ra or the sun. If you may check the translations by a most eminent scholar who studied the pyramid text, I mean, who has been studying and still is, Professor James Peter Allen from Brown University, he translates Ra as the sun with capital letter, does not use Ra as the name of the god, but the sun. So first of all, this is the kind of personification of the sun because it's written with capital letter. And on the other hand, it's written to say that Ra at that moment actually did not exist. It was the sun, and then it somehow became the god. Truly speaking, there is only one attestation in whole pyramid text corpus, and these are really huge. This is really huge corpus of texts. We speak about over 1,000 formulas now. Of course, they are different, different length, different construction, and different time of creation writing. But anyway, there's only one attestation that confirms, in my opinion, that Ra may have been starting to be treated as god in the 6th dynasty by the authors of the pyramid texts. Anyway, coming back to the question and to the pyramid texts themselves, what I actually did to check who is the creator and how is the creation described in the pyramid texts, I simply checked every single passage, and of course it was not reading somebody else's translations, but translating myself. That is why I said it's so important, in my opinion, to translate ancient or any texts yourself, because then you can first of all compare, and then you can question, you can check if somebody was right, because very often happens in Egyptology as well, that somebody famous in the beginning of Egyptological studies said this and that, and then scholars and all the people repeat it, and they think somehow it's truth. You don't have to check it, but if you check, it happens that it's not true. It was a kind of truism said, or which is even more dangerous, I think, it is just sort of implying our European way of thinking in the studies of ancient texts, and this sometimes changes everything completely. European and Christian way of thinking changes our interpretation as well. So when I checked very carefully, I studied all the gods who may have any creation association in the pyramid texts. Later in the end of the lecture, I will show you what in particular I studied. But now, just coming a little bit from the very end, to make some important assumptions, I discovered that actually there is one or two creators in the pyramid texts. First of all, of course, and this is quite obvious, this creator is the god Atum. Atum, the word tem in Egyptian means everything and nothing. The universe and nothingness means not existence and all-embracing completeness. That is something which is contradictory, this is amazing concept, I think. Very complex, very well thought by the Egyptians. And what is very important in the context of the pyramid text and the Old Kingdom in general is that Atum is never depicted in the Old Kingdom, neither in the Old Kingdom nor in the Middle Kingdom, in iconography. So you find him in the text, but there are no pictures. And this picture is from the temple of Hatshepsut at Deir Bahari, from our Polish archaeological mission there. So this is New Kingdom. It's not that old as the pyramid texts, but if you look carefully, you can see that the god is depicted here in double crown, and this double crown is usually or almost always used for the king of Upper and Lower Egypt. So coming to the creation, and this is it, what Professor Tatomir said many times during these summer school lectures, in the very beginning, there was Nu. And Nu, well, first of all, was water, was aquatic element. Sometimes it is called chaos, as but I would be very, very cautious to use this word. And of course, we can somehow compare it to the chaos that was one of the first elements in Greek. But we have to remember that chaos is not disorder. It's just nothingness that contains all the elements in it. It's like etymology from Greek. Your professors of Greek language can tell you much better than I what words from chaos comes, and it's just yawning, like opening your mouth, and when you open your mouth, you have the something which is actually nothing, and this was this sort of image of concept, mental concept of the Egyptians, and there was no light. If you think, or if you may think that because the sun was so important in Egypt, a sun was one of the first created elements, it's not true. According to the pyramid text, first there was the creator who was drifting in Nu, in those primeval waters, and he was drifting, he was doing nothing, he was just waiting for a spur, for inspiration to start creation. And when it came, he created himself, which I would like to underline, because it was said that he very often that he created Mount Ben. Well, I will show you in a minute via attestation of the text of the written sources that the Egyptians expressed that differently, that he created himself as the mount, as a piece of land. Said before during summer school, he may just showing you here a transcription of hieroglyphs done, one of the first ones. The first one was by Maspero, when Gaston Maspero, who discovered the text in pyramids in 1881, he then published the hieroglyphs. But the second edition of the hieroglyphs and more complete was by Kurt Zette, a German scholar. And I'm just showing here you how it looks. Those letters here are versions from different pyramids. So this spell we know from the pyramid of Pepi and Pepi II Neferkara. Okay. And this is the text. Hail to you, Atum. Hail to you, he who is coming into being, Khepra, the self-created. May you be high in this your name, identity of Hil-Ka. May you into being in the name, identity of he who is coming into being, Khepra. And in this spell, it is said that Atum is the one who created himself. You may know, you may have found some information about the god Khepri in the ancient Egyptian religion, but in the pyramid text there is no Khepri. It's just Khepra, and as far as I checked it, it's always in the context of the West and of the end, not always the beginning of, and only once is connected with the sun. I will show you later the text. So it is not separate god Khepri, it's just a form, an epithet of the creator god Atum, as it is in this case. Sometimes appears Khepra as well as the scarab, as beetle. In the pyramid texts, translating them, we have quite many problems, but I'm quite sure it was done on purpose by the authors. You had a very good introduction to the ancient Egyptian and to reading the text by Professor Miyagawa from Tokyo University. So you know that there are determinatives, and probably you had your lessons with Professor Tatomira as well. So you know that there are different signs in Egyptian. For example, here you have the name of the god Atum, probably, but you just have phonetical sound, t, and then you have two consonantal sound, tem, and nothing more. There is no determinative. Normally, if you have the name of the god, you should have a determinative, a kind of classifier after the signs. And this classifier, it would be, in this case of the god, it would be sitting god, sitting figure of a god with a curved beard, sorry. And in the pyramid text, in most of the texts, there are no determinatives, especially when those concepts that we happen to call gods think. So we cannot be sure that they were only the gods or that they were names of the proper gods. They could have been just general concepts of ideas, and I think it's quite important to think about it. Here you have this Kepra, again without any determinative, but written exactly the same. If it is the scarab, the beetle, this beetle is a little bit different and has a little bit different form. So the creator Atum comes into being self-created. He, by his will, comes into being, and then Atum is the one who came into being, becoming itephalic in Unu. He put his phallus in his grasp so that he might make sweetness in the sense of orgasm with it. Thus, the two siblings were born, Shu together with Tefnut. And as you were told before, Shu is the air, but not only. In the pyramid text, Shu is the air, the breath of life, but, which is very important, he is also a sort of luminous air, that is, he is light, both the moon and the sun, but not the sun itself. Actually, the creation of the sun is not mentioned in the pyramid texts, never ever. Just the light. There are, of course, different names for the light, like Yahu in the pyramid text. And then his sister, Tefnut, is the goddess of moisture. This is this watery nature of the word. You have to have water to flourish, to develop, to live simply. And Tefnut is this. And she's also the Maat, has this primeval features of the order in the pyramid texts. If you study it carefully, I cannot, of course, present you here all of the attestations, all of the fragments, because there are really many of them in the texts themselves. So then again, Atum, who is coming into being, and this again, it's repeated that Atum is the one who himself came into being, who self-created. When you became high as the mount, and this is it, what I told you before, that he himself became high, so he just rose up from water, higher, over the water, as the mount. And I would like to emphasize this little word as. When you look here in the Egyptian text, this is just only one consonantal word, M, which is M of predication. I don't know if you know what is predication in English, because it's maybe a little bit more difficult word. It's something that equals or identifies two things. And I emphasize it so strongly because if the Egyptians wanted to compare something with something, they used a different preposition. It was not M. In this case, it was mer in Old Egyptian, and later in Classical Egyptian, it was me. But here we have just mer, which is this identification between, let's say, predicates, between objects in less linguistic language. So he started existence, appeared as Ben. And to confirm this, in English and in Polish as well, we have this difference. But for example, in French, there is no such difference, because you always say comme. Je suis con la mère. Je suis con. And in English, you can say, I'm doing this and that as a mother, or I'm like somebody. It's a different statement. It was noticed many years ago by Russian linguists and professors studying Slav religion, Ivanov and Toporov, and this is instrumental construction. It's just doing something in the role or in a position of something or somebody else, and this is the case. So you rose up as the Ben, as the mount, as the Ben. In the mention of the bird Benu, it's probably the first sort of image of phoenix. In On or in Yunu, you sneezed shu, you spat out Tefnut, and you set your arms around them as the arms of Ka. That your essence, and essence is again Ka, might be in them. O Atum, place your arms about the king, about this construction and about this pyramid as the arms of Ka, that the king's essence may be in it, enduring forever and ever. The Egyptians loved play on words, and you can see it here. You have Benu, and then you have lots of usage of Ka in this text. You have this Ka and Ka again in different, and here as well, and here Ka. Maybe you have seen the such. I don't know if you can see my hand. Such sculptures of Ka statues. They were mentioned yesterday during the lectures of Professor Cafici. They are usually with upright hands like that. So this is Ka statue. This is Ka when you embrace somebody, and it's Ka, the element of the soul of a person. Person is maybe not the best word, because also animals had souls according to Egyptian beliefs. So then you are informed that Atum created the Enid, and Enid was mentioned, namely 9 gods, the first 9 gods. So Shu and Tefnut, who is usually not depicted, and of course this picture is also much younger than the texts themselves. There are not such pictures, such images from the time of the pyramids and the pyramid texts in this from later periods. And then Shu and Tefnut had the god of earth, Geb, and the goddess of sky, Nut. And their children were the 4 maybe most famous gods of ancient Egyptian religion, that is Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys. Anyway, the creator does from himself, from his semen actually, and the semen is mentioned in the pyramid texts really very often, but this semen is not only the source of life, and maybe you have heard that in Greek mythology, semen was coming from the brain. They believed it was coming from the brain, and probably this concept comes from ancient Egyptian religion, in Greek religion. So the creative power, moreover, this sort of concept as earth mother does not exist in Egypt. It's the earth is man, and generally this what is connected with creation, with the giving birth, to some extent is connected, or to a high extent is connected with men. It does not mean that a woman was anyhow excluded. Added to that, the woman in ancient Egyptian culture had a very high position, much higher than in other ancient civilizations like Greek, Roman, or in the Near East. In Egypt, a woman could go to the court herself, could work when she wanted. And anyway, it's just some comments to give you a background for this, what I want to say. So, sorry. The creator from himself, from all of the elements that he had in himself, or has been having all the time, created the world, everything, actually really completely everything, the beauty and the danger, all of the aspects, all contradictory concepts that they were completing each other. And it's very well expressed in the pyramid text. But I said that the creator in the pyramid text has sort of 2 visions, let's say, and the other one, and it is confirmed by later representations of Atum, where he always wears double crown, the red and the white crown of the king. But in the pyramid text, the creator is the king as well, and this is the king who is, it's just to show you. I'm sorry, who was born in Nu, while the sky had not yet come into being, while the earth had not yet come into being, while the endurance had not yet come into being, while confusion had not yet come into being, while the awe had not yet come into being, for the eye of Horus had come into being. Pepi is the unique one that great body that was born formerly, beforehand. Well, it's very tempting to say before time in Yunu, who cannot be arrested because of the king or taken to officials, who cannot be accused, who cannot be found guilty. Such is Pepi. He cannot be accused. He will not be arrested because of the king. He will not be taken to officials. That means to the court. He will not be judged. As you probably know, the concepts of judgment in ancient Egyptian religion, so the king will not be judged. And the opponents of Pepi will not be justified. Again, very important concept of justification after death in Egypt. This Pepi will not be miserable. His nails will not grow long. No bone of Pepi can be broken. So Pepi is the one who was given birth, which is very important, because he was not created, he did not come into being, he was born. And well, an obvious association comes to mind that in Christian religion, Jesus Christ was also born, not created. And this is, I think, very important concepts to all religions. And in this case, you have a very tricky, very strange, you may think, concept. The mother of king was pregnant with him, who is in the undersky. In Egypt, you had this compatibility of elements. So if you had sky, you had to have undersky. Everything was somehow or in double or triple, but on different levels of perception. I would tend to say that in, let's say, human word, it was double, and in a divine word, it was triple. As 3 is the completeness, and 3 multiple 3 is 9, which is completeness, and that is in it 9 gods of Egypt. So the king was born by his father. His mother was pregnant, but he was born by his father Atum. Why the sky had not yet come into being, why the earth had not yet come into being, why people had not yet come into being, why the gods had not been born yet, again, the gods, why death had not yet come into being. So you see this concept of the king being completely primeval. And here's this what I mentioned in the very beginning of this concept of Ra Atum, and then face the fragment that mentions it. The pharaoh called Merenra generally. They will make you live and resemble the seasons of Horus, of the Achet, when they made his name as the one who is far from the gods. They will make for you the utterance, that is speaking, saying something out loud, which is very important. They made for Ra Atum, and this is another discussion, what is Ra Atum here, and for another lecture perhaps, who shines every day. They will introduce Nemtim Zafmer and Ra to their thrones as the one at the head of all in it, like Ra. And you see here it's like, not as, but like. And if we check in the text, you have the word merra here, different preposition, like his substitution. They will cause these Nemtim Zafmer and Ra to come into being like Ra, the sun, in this his name or identity, if you prefer, of this who is coming into being. That's Ra in the morning, Capra. You shall ascend to them like Ra, the sun, in this his name, identity of this who is existing, Ra. and you shall turn aside from their side, like Ra, the sun in this his name identity of this who is perishing. And here it's Tem. Well, if these are gods or concepts, it's a big question, of course. So all of these mentioned here concepts may have later some creative aspects, or have, for sure. But in the pyramid texts, it's Atum and the pharaoh identified with him, or with this concept of everything and nothingness in one, the creator. And these are the elements. I will be speaking about the elements of the created word in the second part of the lecture. But here you have all of those first elements: piece of land, water, which was the very first one, piece of land, light, seed, or if you prefer, salmon, Shu and Tefnut, moon and sun. And this is that actually, I think the Egyptians believed in religious reality creation, and I would stick to the term religious and not magical, because I think it's much more important and much more powerful, because we are speaking about religious texts, and magic was used here in this text. I think, and this is my personal scholar opinion, only in the so-called serpent spells, where they had to repel dangerous creatures. About dangerous creatures I will be speaking in a minute, but then here they wanted to create a certain religious reality to protect the king, and to make sure he will be identified with the creator in the afterlife, and he will be ruling the world. So it is said about Unis. You may find this name spelled as Unas, and it's more common, but I use Unis because in Egypt I always try to use the names or the concepts as much close to Egyptian word as it is possible. So do not change it if it's all right. O Unis, it is not dead but alive that you have gone away. Sit upon the throne of Osiris. Your scepter, Abba, is in your hand. May you give orders to the living. Mekas, again, it's other kind of scepter. And your scepter, Nehabat, are in your hand. So give orders to those whose seats are hidden. That means the deceased. Your arms are those of Atum. Your shoulders are those of Atum. Your belly is that of Atum. Your back is that of Atum. Your hind parts are those of Atum. Your legs are those of Atum. But your face is that of a jackal. Let the mounts of Horus serve you. Let the mounts of Set serve you. And we do not have much time to discuss it in detail, why it is identification, and not just saying, as some scholars did, that because parts of the body of Unis are identified with parts of the body of, or compared, as some said, for example, Merzer, of the parts of Atum, so he looks like a human. Really, what for to say that? I would just joke, which is quite obvious, yes, that the king would look like a human. This, that the creator looks like human, it's maybe more surprising. But anyway, this is just saying that, and it's one example. There are many other examples when it is said that some part of the body of the king of different pharaohs are compared with are identified with different parts of the body of different gods. And here you have the creator's body and the face of a jackal, not Anubis. I checked it very carefully. When it is Anubis who is mentioned, different hieroglyphs. In this case, it's Zab. Zab written with a standing jackal, figure of jackal. With just one sitting figure of jackal, which is surprising because normally, anyway, you may not be sure if it's Zab or Inpu, Anubis, because it's just one sign. Yes. Again, you do not, in this case, you have a sort of determinative or ideogram written, but not phonetical single signs. And that is why I compared all fragments where this kind of identification takes place in the pyramid texts. And in some cases, it is written with consonantal signs, and we may know that it's Zab always in this case and not Anubis. Why jackal? How I would interpret that is that he is the creator, but he also has this very dangerous aspect. And this dangerous aspect was necessary for the king to protect himself and the whole world from disorder. So again, coming back and summing up, this was sort of identified concepts of Atum and Pharaoh, who was the creator and who created the word in the pyramid texts. But perhaps there is some kind of initiative by Nu, who has commanded Teti to Atum. Teti is another pharaoh who had the text. And this who is open armed, this is an epithet of Atum, because he is this one who, I'm sorry, who transmitted his ka through the embrace to all the creatures of the world. So Nu commanded Teti to Shu. And they were said, take Teti by his arm, take Teti to the sky, that he may not die on earth among people. There comes important question. Actually, there is no mention of creation of people in the pyramid texts. These mentions are much younger than the pyramid texts, and in the pyramid texts, people appear only in this context that the king should not stay with them, that he should be barred with a door or gate or some kind of barrier from them, and he should go to the sky where they have not their place. But there is also this concept of created word, this inheritance that was given by the creator, the pharaoh, to people. As you can see here, gain the inheritance of your father God, that is the earth, in the presence of the Init in Yunu, this Heliopolis, as an appearance of him. Say two great and big Inits, which are at the head of the basos of Yunu. The two great and big gods, foremost of the field of rushes, have introduced you as their firstborn to the throne of Horus. That is the first pharaoh, yeah, because the throne of Horus is the throne of the ruler on the earth. They have established Shu for you at your east side, Tefnut at your west side, you Nu at your south side, and the undersky at your north side, so that they might direct you to their beautiful and pure places, which they had made for Ra when they placed him on their thrones. So this is the concept of the human, let's say, word presented in the pyramid text quite clearly. And we do not have much time now. I should end this part. So just very quickly, maybe saying you what kind of method I am using as a scholar, Egyptologist, to study the texts. First of all, wherever you read the texts, and the language itself, I think the most important thing, and that's why I was so happy and full of admiration for you that you really study original text and you translate yourselves and not read others' translations, is that we have to somehow decide ourselves what we really do, and what kind of language we interpret. This, what kind of scholars we are, what language we speak, where we live, what education we had, well, even if we are a woman or a man, it is important. It implies a lot and somehow influences our own interpretation. I wanted to tell you a story, but maybe other time. Anyway, the method I use is linguistic worldview, a language, a trenched interpretation of reality, which can be expressed in the form of judgments about the world, people, things, or events. It is an interpretation, not a reflection. It unites people in a given social environment, creates a community of thoughts, feelings, and values. Linguistic worldview is a language trenched interpretation of the reality of a studied community, that is, community using one language, that is interwoven with its culture. Or, in other words, it is culture embedded, culture in the language. This leads to reconstructed identity or identities based on linguistic and co-linguistic data. That means all of the data. Linguistically, well, I analyze and all the people using this method analyze everything, really every single word that is in text that I study. But of course, this co-linguistic data is everything else. Studies of religion, studies of philosophy of religion, astrophysics in the case of the pyramid text and Egyptian religious text, biology, etc. And for me, very important thing is that this, what I study, are religious texts. So they were written because somebody believed in that. If you take this perspective, your interpretation changes tremendously, because I believe we should not treat this text just as stories about gods, heroes, and so on. And there is no actually concept of hero in ancient Egypt as it was in ancient Greece. Anyway, so these texts are written sources of a religion, of somebody's beliefs, somebody that these people living so many centuries before us believed in. This what for me at the moment is most fascinating are the pyramid texts here and the coffin texts. And just not to take too much time, and just summing up, of course I have to always answer if it's language of religion, of a kind of religious style. I think to some extent both imply. There is something like religious style, you certainly know, but it's not very intensely studied. Only in the case of the Bible, not ancient texts, for example. And the pyramid texts were always, throughout the history of Egypt, copied and they were treated as this sort of primeval pattern of religious texts to some extent. And just to show you the basic and the most important book on the linguistic worldview, or ethno-linguistic, if you want to call it, is written by our professor Jerzy Bartmiński, who is a Polish distinguished linguist. Well, I was working with his team. I has been working for over 15 years, and I find it very productive. We also published a lexicon, axiological lexicon on different concepts. This is the first volume about home, about the concepts, or on the concept of home. And these are the books Professor Tatomir mentioned. This one is about the concept of the creator, and this is the one in Polish, more general, about the pyramid texts. And well, we do not have more time to discuss it in detail, so I will just show you what has been studied. So to create a definition, an open definition, I studied really everything what had any connection, even later, with the creation concept. So all gods who could have had any features of creator gods, and then all the elements or spaces, and also, as I said, spaces and time, which is very difficult matter in this case, and means how the word was created, and especially the language, the grammar of the texts. Grammar is the most solid source, the most solid proof we have of some concepts. So it comes to formulating open definitions. If you well want to know why open definitions, you may ask later, and it's just for the reflection and just to be a little bit cautious, a little bit humble towards the texts we study and towards the people we think we know. It is quite dangerous because sometimes, even if we try to interpret, I don't know, Chinese metaphors and from nowadays, contemporary or modern ones, we probably, not knowing the language and not knowing the culture very well from the inside, we will not be able to interpret metaphors. And we very often say that we interpret ancient Egyptian metaphors, and we know that that was metaphor. And I believe in many cases it wasn't. It was very direct way of saying something they believed in. So if they said that the king was going to the sky on the smoke of the incense, they might have believed in that. And it was probably not a metaphor, as in our modern Christian liturgy, we believe that during the Mass there is transfiguration, isn't it? In Catholic churches. So then somebody is reading the Bible and says, well, it's a metaphor, but it's not for us, yes? So if we try to interpret, to just come a little bit closer to their way of thinking, or just to get rid of our own impediments, let's say, of modern words, I think we get much closer to the concepts that the ancient Egyptians wrote down for the posterity, for their children, let's say. Mulțumesc foarte mult.